A very hearty good morning to one and all present here. I would like to invite you all to an atmosphere of great celebrations. The Founders Day, a day celebrating the anniversary of the establishment of the Christian Brothers organization. Now, why is this Founders Day celebrated? It is traditionally one of the most important days in the school calendar where the members of the school community, staff, teachers, students, and friends meet to commemorate those who have bequeathed the resources for its development, for the development of the Christian Brothers organization. Now, coming up, we have a short skit based on these.
Edmund Rice was born to Robert Rice and Margaret Rice on the farming property of Westcote in Callan, County Kilkenny. Edmund Rice was the fourth of the seven sons, although he also had two half-sisters, Joan and Jane Murphy, the offspring of his mother's first marriage. The boys of the Rice family obtained an education at home through Patrick Grace. As a young man, Rice spent 2 years at school, which, despite the provisions of the penal laws, the authorities suffered to exist in the city of Kilkenny.
Michael owned a merchant business in the nearby port town of Waterford. In 1779, Edmund was apprenticed to him, moving into a house in the market paradise of Ballybricken, entering the business of trading livestock and other supplies and the supervising of loading of victuals onto ships bound for the British colonies. Michael Rice died in 1785 and this business passed to Edmund. He was an active member of a society established in the city for the relief of the poor.
In about 1785, he married a young woman named Mary Elliot, the daughter of a waterfront tenant. Little is known about their married life, and Mary died in January 1789 following an accident, possibly by a fever that set in afterwards. The circumstances surrounding this accident are unclear, but she may have fallen off a horse that she was riding or thrown out of a carrier by panicking horse. Pregnant at the time, a daughter was born on Mary's deathbed. Daughter also named Mary was born handicapped. Edmund Rice was left widower with an infant daughter in declined health.
Following his wife's death, he started discerning a vocation to join a monastery, perhaps in France. One day, while discussing his vocation with the sister of Thomas Hussey, a bishop of Waterford, a band of rash boys passed by. She pointed to them and cried, "What, would you bury yourself in a cell on the continent rather than devote your wealth and life to the spiritual and the material interest of these poor youths?" After settling his business affair in 1802, Rice devoted his life to prayer and charitable work, especially with the poor and marginalized of Waterford. In 1802, when Rice established a makeshift school in a converted stable in New Street, Waterford, he found that the children were so difficult to manage that the teachers resigned.
This promoted him to sell his thriving business to another prominent Catholic merchant, Mr. Kwan, and devoted himself to training teachers who would dedicate their lives to prayers and to teaching the children free of charge. Despite of difficulties involved, Edmund's classes were so popular that another temporary school had to be set up on his properties, this time nearby Stephen Street. The turning point of Rice's ministry was the arrival of two young men, Thomas Grosvenor and Patrick Finn, from his hometown of Callan. They came to him with a desire of joining a congregation but had not decided which they would join. As it turned out, they remained to teach at Edmund Rice's school and formed their own. The subsequent success of the new street school led to a more permanent building named Mount Sion, where construction began on 1st June 1802. The Mount Sion monastery was officially blessed by the Bishop Thomas Hussey on 7 June 1803.
In 1808, seven of the staff, including Edmund Rice, took religious vows under the authority of Bishop Power of Waterford. Following the example of Nanonagel's Presentation Sisters, they were called the Presentation Brothers. This was the first congregation of men to be ever founded on Ireland, and one of the very few ever founded by laymen. Gradually, a transformation had taken place amongst the quarry kids of Waterford, largely attributed towards the work of Edmund and his brothers, who educated, clothed, and fed the children. Other bishops in Ireland supplied Edmund with men, and these he prepared for a religious life and a life of teaching. This way, the Presentation brothers spread throughout Ireland.
Retirement and death. In February 1838, Edmund Rice left the North Richmond Street community and returned to Mount Sion in Waterford. Aged 76 and by now in poor health, he wrote to the different communities calling for a general chapter to elect a new superior general. The chapter, which opened on 24 July 1838, resulted in the election of Brother Michael Paul Riordan as Rice's successor. From this time on, Edmund Rice spent an increasing proportion of his time at Mount Sion and the adjoining school, showing a continued interest in the pupils and the teachers. After living in a near comatose state for more than 2 years and in the constant care of a nurse since May 1842, Rice died at 11 a.m. on 29 August 1844 at Mount Sion, Waterford, where his remains lie in a casket to this day. Large crowds filled the streets around his house in Dublin to honor him.
1976, Kevin Ellison of Newry had been given only 48 hours to live due to complications from a gangrenous colon and an apparent lack of viable colon tissue, a conclusion reached by 5 doctors after hours in surgery. A family friend gave Ellison's parents a relic of Edmund Rice. Many friends prayed for a miracle, though the intercession of Rice and a special mass was offered for Ellison's recovery. Only the relic of Edmund Rice was placed at the bedside of the dying man. The latter survived the 48-hour period during which he was supposed to die, and more besides. Upon investigation, surgeons discovered a considerable length of previously undetected colon, fully recovered after a few weeks. These paved way for Rice's beatification on 6 October 1996 by Pope John Paul II. His official feast day is 5th May, which we celebrate as Founders Day.
Dear God, we thank you for the life of Edmund Rice. He opened his heart to you, present in those oppressed by poverty and injustice. May we follow his example of faith and generosity. Grant us the courage and compassion of Edmund as we seek to live lives of love and service. Amen.